Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Kari Joly from Positive Families Education and Training in Canada. I stumbled over that the first few times I attempted to record it, so I slowed way down for y'all this time. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kari.
Thanks for having me.
I've been laughing about how much I stumble on the intro pieces because it just seems like the things should be easy to say. And yet when I get started, I fall over my words sometimes. And I think that's a pretty common thing. Do you ever have that experience?
All the time.
All the time.
What I'm talking about right in the middle of the sentence.
Yeah. It's so funny because we don't really talk about that piece of how our brains work that much, but it is an interesting thing. And as I was stumbling over the intro, this was our third try, I realized that's fairly common for me when doing a podcast, is that I stumble at the beginning, and then when I get rolling, things work out and it's all fine. And that is pretty much my experience with life and any kind of work.
Absolutely. I did a Family Pause Parent Education webinar, and I've done a few of them now. And I always am very nervous, and I have to really watch myself that I don't rush it in the beginning. But after I'm through that beginning part, then it just flows, and I feel like I'm talking less like a robot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to be talking to you today. So our audience is a whole variety of pet professionals. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of pet professional you are and what you do?
I am a certified professional dog trainer, and I like predominantly working with families with children and expecting families. So preparing dogs for life with a new baby and toddler.
I think that that's a particularly challenging piece because we know what's coming next. Like, we know when this infant arrives that all expectation is that 18 months from now, there will be someone running through the house, dragging plastic toys, making a lot of noise and causing chaos. And the dog can't know that. The dog can't anticipate, I know what happens with these little ones. This is what comes next. And puppies make a little bit more sense to adult dogs, but even then, I think sometimes they're boggled by the arrival of a puppy. But the arrival of an infant is just, I don't know. I think from the parenting perspective, the changes feel gradual, and also we know what's coming. And from the dog perspective, I imagine they seem pretty abrupt and surprising. Like, oh, wow, now this thing is rolling. Oh, my, now it's crawling. Oh, it's on my bed.
And tell people, like, they don't have an app like we do to what's coming. And that as the baby goes through its different milestones, it actually feels like a whole different person to the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Where we don't see it that way. We just see this gradual change.
Yeah. So what got you particularly interested in working with families for this particular niche?
Well, before I decided to become a dog trainer, I was a La Leche League leader. And so it was like a mother-to-mother breastfeeding support group. Mm-hmm. And I also was very interested in becoming a doula. Though I had many people tell me it's really hard when you have little kids, you should wait until they're older. So that's what I decided to do. And in doing that, I had one really horrible job that made me ask, what am I doing with my life? And then that's when I decided, of course, I've always wanted to be a dog trainer since I was 9. So why am I not doing this? And I think it was because originally I wanted to be a service dog trainer. And because where I lived, it wasn't as easy to do that. I decided that I was going to write it off altogether, I think. And then when I started to do this and my kids got older, I kind of veered a little bit away from the breastfeeding support and wanting to become a doula, but I still loved kids and babies and that kind of thing. And it actually was, I was looking for a name for my company and I knew I wanted to work with kids. And I actually looked up Family Paws because that's what I wanted to name my company.
Mm.
And when I typed in Family Paws Parent Education came up and I went, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my dog. So initially I ended up becoming Family Tales. That was my business up until like a couple of weeks ago. And I contacted Jen and had an interview with her, and the rest is history. I've been a Family Paws parent educator for almost 5 years now, and it just fits perfectly into what I wanted to do with my business. And I think it also came a little bit from having an Alaskan Husky who was terrified of children. And I was very, very nervous about bringing a child into a home with her. And I hired a trainer. And now looking back, she didn't have any experience into what you should do to prepare your dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I wanted to provide people with that because I knew what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said when you were 9, you wanted to be a dog trainer, which is interesting because I often ask my guests, what did you want to be when you were 10? So when you were 9, you wanted to be a dog trainer. And then we know that at some point you wanted to be a doula, but take me from like 9 until dog training came back onto your radar of what did you do? What was your path?
My mom started volunteer raising guide dog puppies for the blind when she was in high school, and she continued. She still does. And when you turn 9 years old, you're able to be a volunteer in terms of like have your own puppy to raise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing that when I was 9. I was one of the only kids that stuck with it all the way up until I didn't live in the house anymore. And even then I would still take her dogs for a weekend or here and there. And I wanted to become a service dog trainer. And I thought I would become a trainer for guide dogs for the blind. So I went to school for agriculture just to get a degree in animal science of some sort. And I had to do an internship. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I saw an advisor and he saw my experience with dogs and said, I have the perfect thing. And he was a guest at a dog sledding company up in the Yukon. And so I thought that was intriguing. I've never, ever worked with sled dogs before. So I ended up going up to the Yukon to work with sled dogs for my internship. And when there, I met my husband. And after I graduated, I ended up living in the Yukon for 14 years.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So up at the Yukon, there's not a lot. Like I could have pursued becoming a service dog trainer independently on my own, but that's not really what I wanted to do. I didn't think I had the structure to like work towards that. And I don't think I was confident enough actually to do that kind of training by myself with no real guidance. So I decided I could help some families. And once I actually decided to become a dog trainer, that is.
Hmm.
So yeah, when living in the Yukon, I kind of wrote it off because moving to a big city that had an organization like that was not something we decided we wanted to do.
Hmm.
I just took a complete different path.
So interesting. And how old are your kids now?
My daughter's almost 13 and my son is 10 now.
And you no longer live in the Yukon. So where are you now?
I am in Cochrane, Alberta. So we moved the summer of 2022.
And what changes have you experienced as a result of that move?
Um, it's easier to fly anywhere and cheap. The winters are warmer. They're not quite as horribly cold. I mean, we do still get really cold, but we have these warm winds that come in, so it doesn't make it as awful as the winters were in the Yukon.
So I shouldn't complain about winter in Detroit to you.
Well, winter's probably wetter. Ours is really dry, so it hits differently.
Mm.
Bone chilling cold when it's a damp, wet cold.
Ah, yeah. And bone chilling is really the right word. Like I feel all of my bones and my joints. And
Yep.
I never, ever, ever wanted to live here until there was going to be a grandchild. And then I was like, well, if we're moving anyway, okay, I'll move where it's cold. But I imagine it was a little bit the experience you had with like, oh, here's this man I'd like to marry, and he lives in the Yukon. Guess I'm staying in the Yukon, which wasn't necessarily part of your plan when you went up for the internship.
That's right.
Yeah. Life leads us on funny little paths.
It does.
So, what do you find most rewarding about your work as a trainer?
I think what I find most rewarding is definitely seeing the improvement that people have and when their dog settles into their new life. Um, or or you come into a home that has a really not great situation and you're able to push through it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just the gratitude people have for like helping figure out those difficult times. And I like to tell people to celebrate the small wins because in a lot of cases, if you don't see the small changes, it's very easy to give up a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. And celebrating the small wins is tricky at times because they are small, but they're important. How do you celebrate small wins in your own life?
I knew you were going to ask me a question like this. Um, a good question and one I don't think people think about very often.
Well, let me narrow it down for you. I'll take pity on you here. Think of a recent client interaction and a small win that occurred and why that mattered. And can you share that with us?
Okay. Yes, I have. I have a client who has a very fearful small husky, and she's super adorable. And she's scared of a lot of people. And when they're out on walks, she's all over the place. And before we really got started with training, all I did was say, "I just want you to take treats on your walk," because they weren't before. And immediately she emailed me and said, "Oh my goodness, just taking the treats has made such a huge difference."
Hmm.
And I think seeing that she kind of had this relief about her because she said she was very nervous about this situation and they had gone through a few trainers already. Um, and you could see just the confidence every session we had. She got a little more confident in her skills with her and that she could really help control her and advocate for her. That was huge for me because the difference between somebody giving up and not is potentially that dog being shifted around to home to home to home. And in a case where there's so much fear involved, that dog's life doesn't look very good.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Now, because I'm mean, I'm going to push you just a little bit further. So that's a lovely win. And I'm curious if you can acknowledge yourself for the role you played in it. And if you were to acknowledge yourself for the role you played in it, what would you like to acknowledge yourself for?
I think maybe for helping the person find confidence in themselves, because that's so much of dog training that a lot of people don't think it is. It's so much more about working with people than it is about working with dogs. And you know what? I feel like to celebrate my win, I really like to talk about it with people. And I often will immediately message my partner in crime now and just talk about how good a session was and what we achieved in that session.
It's awesome. That's perfect. Yeah, that's a lovely way. That's actually some of the elements of savoring that you've just described right there. It's like noticing and then finding a way to share it and kind of re-experience it for yourself while sharing it. But then by having shared it, it anchors it so you can come back to it. And you said helping the person find confidence in themselves. And I have to tell you, I think that's the work I'm doing now. Like, I think that's what I was doing as a dog trainer, but I don't think those are the words I've used in either case. So I might be stealing that um,
Problem.
from this particular episode. So I always ask my guests to share some words that had meaning for them. And the words you chose were choose to lose, which is an interesting little phrase. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit more about that phrase, what it means to you, how it came into your life. What does choose to lose mean for you?
Choose to lose is when you're in a situation with anything in life, not just dog training, but I use it in dog training a lot, where you know you're not going to get there today and you're frustrated. It could be anything that's happening in your life. And you can say, I'm not going to do this today. If I'm frustrated and I'm trying to teach my dog not to pull, we're going to get nowhere. I'm going to say, take me where you want to go because we're not going to learn anything today. I'm not in the right mindset. I learned this phrase doing coaching with you, and you connected me with some now two really great friends that I have only met one of them once now. And my friend Christine, she said this to me and it just resonated with me. And I'm like, of course, you can choose to lose. You don't always have to do everything right all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that conversation with Christine because I think she kind of blew us all away when she was saying, and sometimes she can choose how she loses. Like there can be like, well, if it's not going to work, what what is the way I'd like to lose, And it was an interesting thing because the optimist in me was like, choose to lose. No, no. And yet there's a real beauty and power in that of saying, this isn't happening right now. So I'm going to choose to lose and how I'm going to choose that and what we're going to go from there. So yeah, that was an interesting conversation with Christine. She had a lot to share, and I hope she'll come on the podcast at some point, but we'll see. She was shy when I asked before. Perhaps we'll just drop that little hint right there for her. Okay, so choose to lose. And so when you're with a client and you have this experience of, uh-oh, it's time to choose to lose. How do you use that?
Well, back to this fearful dog. We were teaching her how to look, how to give attention to her owners instead of constantly scanning. We started at the house and she picked it up like nothing. We went into her backyard and she actually showed no fear towards me whatsoever, except when we were in her backyard. For whatever reason, something about in her backyard made her terrified of me. And even me being there, she wasn't able to give. She was over threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? We're not going to do this today, right now. we're actually done training because she is now in a place where she's not going to learn and we're going to get frustrated and you're going to lose confidence in yourself. So if we have time, we can start talking about something else, but we're done actually training right now.
Yeah. And that just sets everyone up for success for the next time. And honors and respects where that dog was, instead of pushing her forward and trying to get something that wasn't really on her bingo card at the moment. She was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about this career that you kind of wanted since you were 9 years old, and it's a slightly different form, but it's dog training, which is unusual. Most of us didn't start thinking dog training until later, mostly because it wasn't offered as an option. You had such early exposure to seeing dog training and puppy raising in pursuit of dog training. I lost where this question was going. So interesting. Okay, so I think my question for you is, if 9-year-old you could see you now, what would she think?
I think she would think it was pretty awesome what I was doing, even though I didn't stick with the service dog training. And it's not completely off the table. I just have other things I'd like to achieve first now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Life is long. That's a message I told. It's not always for everyone, but that's a message that carried me through my children's very young years, where I was just like, there's things I want to do and I can't, and I don't have time, or I don't have bandwidth, or I don't. And I would just say, life is long and I will have opportunities, and there can be phases and seasons and things. So yeah, service dog training isn't off the table, but right now what's really lighting you up is this work with the families and helping dogs be prepared for life with kids, which I think is a real awesome niche, just because there are so many trainers who don't particularly enjoy that facet for good reason. It's complicated. And I just think if we can each sort of find our sweet spot, then it's helpful because we have people to refer to. Like, I never liked separation anxiety. I was always happy to refer that. So when people would send, aggression or kid and dog stuff my way, I was like, okay. But separation anxiety, I felt immediately incompetent. And there are lovely tools and trainers who are really fascinated by it. And awesome. Let's have them use their gifts in that way. And you're using yours with families. And perhaps in the future, you'll be doing service dog work. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Who knows? Because life is long. So if I could give you a magic wand, and with this wand, you could grant one wish, you could bestow a gift upon all pet professionals, what are you going to give us?
Ooh. Confidence. A lot of people look like they have it, but when you get to know them, they're putting on their dog trainer hat. They put their hat on and they're confident, but behind the scenes, they're doubting themselves constantly.
Yeah. In my family, we called it my dog training persona.
So I read your book and I was immediately like, she's so similar to how I feel. And even like how you describe your husband and your home life, I was like, this is so similar.
My husband still encourages me at events. Like, went to a wedding this summer and he was like, well, put on your dog training persona and pretend you're outgoing. Oh.
I'm getting this is one thing. I recently partnered with my good friend Alicia because we do the exact same thing, and we were introduced by Jennifer Shryock because we were both family paws parent educators. And one thing that I love about her is she pushes me into the uncomfortable, and I don't think I would have done that for myself. But it does feel uncomfortable, but it gets me going and it keeps me on my toes and it keeps me growing, because you can't grow until you get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's good discomfort and bad discomfort. And there's the ones that we're reaching for, we're not quite prepared to go for. And then someone can encourage us to just move toward it. Recently, I was learning about bravery, and that we're all kind of reaching for the bravery to do that thing. And that a simple substitute for this is sincerity and humility. And actually, this is in an email that I'm sending out tomorrow, but this episode will be recorded and sent a few months later. So it will be old information for people who actually read the email. But it rang true when I actually thought about it. Like, if we have the sincerity of like, this is important, this matters, I really want to do what I can to help this, whatever it is, when we're coming from a place of sincerity, then we're a little bit more emboldened to take action. And then the humility piece is about, I can't solve the whole thing or do all of it, but getting really clear about the pieces that we can do and what actions we can take. And that when we overuse humility, it comes out as self-deprecation and an undervaluing of what we can do, which is not empowering. But to use humility properly and really look at like, okay, so I can do this. And if we go pair that with the sincerity, I really want this change, this effect, this thing to happen. And here's the piece I can do. We don't need bravery anymore, because there's such clarity of like, this matters and this is the piece I can do. And I think that's super helpful. So that resonated with me. And I think that having someone like Alicia for you to be working with who helps you tap into your sincerity of like, this is what I want to do. And she's like, well, awesome, go do it. You go. And then she can help you and help you see like it does matter to you. And what can you do? Like, you don't have to do all of anything. You just have to do the pieces you could do, your pieces. Does that resonate with you at all?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, like, we're kind of there for each other.
Yeah.
Bouncing it back and forth to each other.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our moments of doubt and our imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And it helps to have somebody back who can be like, I don't think you need to think that way. And here's why.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. This has been a really interesting conversation. It went in directions I wasn't anticipating today. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
They can go to positivefamilies.com or Positive Families on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, we're just launched our new business together. We just partnered. So there's a lot coming on to social media right now, which is fun.
Okay, well, we'll all go check it out, and I will link it all up in the show notes. It's been so fun talking with you today, Kari. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at colleenpilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and be long.